13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
That was a good one, Bill.
I did not recall that he knew Robert Monroe. But we got to discover that in the interview together. So this episode, we had with us Tom Campbell, who you may know from his trilogy My Big Toe, which is a series of books that talks about how the nature of the universe is. And it reminds me of our friend of the show, Blake Art's project called Simulation Assumptionism. There's lots of parallels and overlapping between these two guests, I think. But it's definitely, this is one of those episodes that I have been working for more than a few weeks to put together. This is probably a pursuit of mine since January or so. And you will notice that the order of the questions that was given to Dr. Campbell changed. That's because we do occasionally change the order of the questions and mix in new questions to the show, depending on what kind of feedback we get from the guests. So with that being said, if you have like a new question you would like to be featured on 13 Questions, or if there's possibly an old one that's used as a bonus now that you want to be seen put back into the rotation, just let us know. We're super easy to get a hold of, right, Adam?
Absolutely easy to access.
This was definitely one I'm going to have. I don't know who gets to edit this, but whoever's going to edit it is going to have fun listening back to it. There's definitely packed full of some good perspectives from Tom Campbell and his accumulation of existence in this lifetime is made available to us on 13 Questions. I think that's amazing. So you're definitely going to enjoy listening to this interview. And what are some other things to be grateful about? I think we have a jingle for that.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
So did you have one ready to go? I've got something.
Of course I do, Bill. Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, I think mine's a little bit different this time.
Mine is incredibly simple and it's easy. It is, maybe it isn't. I guess it's multiple things. So the generality would be this show, this episode, this guest, finding his binaural beats. I've been looking to find a good set of binaural beats for years and have not found any, solid resource, any, I don't know. I haven't found anything that I've wanted to settle into. So, I love this guest and where he, has spent his time and pulled this research from. So yeah, as soon as we're done with this episode, I'm going down and downloading his set of binaural beats. So I will definitely be utilizing that in my remote viewing technique. And even cooler, this guest, if you go over to his site, you'll see that he has some resources over there if you are into remote viewing as well. So yeah, fun episode. Very fun.
Yeah, the binaural beats thing is super. I've looked for those too on the internet, and the stuff I've come across thus far isn't really too good, but you're definitely going to be checking out.
Well, and it's worth mentioning to anybody, if you get into binaural beats, you do need to get a really good a set of stereo headphones. Speakers aren't going to work unless you've got a very, very good audio setup, but you need the difference in frequencies. You need them to be coming into your brain because a binaural beat actually creates a different beat within your head. So you have a certain frequency, and then in between those frequencies, you will feel and hear and sense a third frequency, and that is the difference between those two sounds. So binaural beats are incredibly cool, but if you're not able to experience that full frequency of sound to give you that effect, you're listening on a lower quality set of headphones, then you're just not going to catch it. So check out your headphone specs to see what the highest and lowest frequency response is, and then make sure it matches up with your binaural beats.
Yeah, you'll have to report back on a later episode.
Oh yeah, how awesome there! Yeah. I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about that. I'm going to try it too, so maybe we can both talk about it. But my gratitude is actually, I haven't really discussed this with you, Adam, yet, so we're going to do it here live on the intro. But I am going to start what I'm going to call a gratitude jar, and this is in conjunction with the new way in which you can support the show through LiberaPay, which is an open source, kind of like a value for value way that creators can get support from whoever wants to support, right, from donors. So we're all about value for value on this show, and what better way to contribute than, if you're going to do that, than with a value for value system like LiberaPay. So with that being said, if anybody, we did switch over the PayPal accounts from Gamerica, so those are separate. It's been like that for quite some time now, and I think the PayPal will still work on the website the way it's set up now. But if you go to the LiberaPay link, which you will find in the show notes for this episode, and it will be added to the website on a later date. But if you sign up there, and I will be able to see your name, and I will write your name on a piece of paper using purple ink, and I will put that paper in a jar, and it will be the gratitude jar. And whenever Adam and I do this segment, I will be thinking about that jar and sending my energy and love to not only the people in that jar, but everybody, but so more specifically that name, because it's now attenuated and kind of etherically attached to you, right? So there's a little bit more energy that goes that way. But we can do this during not only the gratitude segment, but anytime, like I sit down for a meditation or whatever, there's always a spot to bless those that we care about. So I will be including those people's names in the jar in those types of activities, which I do, and which anybody can do. We can make this a whole big group intention experiment, not even experiment, because we know it's going to work. If you send out good energy, it will return to you tenfold, right? So what do you think about that, Adam? Does that sound like a good idea?
To create a gratitude jar?
For any donation. It doesn't have to be recurring, doesn't have to be, a big amount, any amount, any one time, recurring, whatever, just as long as you supported. I would like to extend another way to, give back, because we don't really get too much feedback on the show other than the download numbers. So maybe this will kickstart some more of that. I don't know. It's just thoughts.
Sounds good to me. I'm interested to see, where that goes.
Yeah. So we'll put that out there, and we'll see what happens. If there's any issues with setting up a donation or sending one, just send the show an email. We'll get it figured out. It should be fairly straightforward. So LiberaPay does accept PayPal and Stripe, in case you were wondering. But other than that, you should definitely check out the website, just because that features the Question 3 book catalog, which features all of the answers to the Question 3 book, which is what is the most influential book and why. So that makes a good reading list. And of course, you will be able to find all of our affiliates on the website, which you should totally support if you want to support the show, or just share the show with somebody that you care about, somebody that you love, somebody that is close to you. Right, Adam?
1000%, Bill. Absolutely.
So yeah, head on over to the website for all that good information. And there's also all of the links to the social media accounts, which we manage. So
like Bill said, reach out to us. We're always here. We're always excited to hear the guests that you can give us. We've got a whole bunch of cool guests, lined up from us, from a couple of the formers that we've had on the show. And you too can be part of that. So if there's somebody that you want to hear these questions asked of, send us their information. And if you have some questions that you think would be good for the show, send those in too. We definitely need, like we talked tonight, everything is evolving, and that includes every aspect of your life. We're all working our way, towards this, negative entropy, trying to just become more efficient, a more balanced life. And that includes just refining these questions. So yeah, send us your thoughts. Make the show you and better.
Yeah, let us know what you think. I kind of am the custodian of the social media accounts, which is fine. I enjoy doing it, and I'm happy to. And so reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out, connect. I'm super easy to get a hold of, usually pretty responsive. Yeah, don't be afraid. So let's get into it with Tom Campbell on 13 questions. Guess we'll get started. Before we do, though, Tom, I just wanted to say that I appreciate talking to guests which realize that we are more than our physical bodies, and I think that you are one of those people. So I've been really looking forward to this interview.
Okay, well, I think you do a whole lot of these interviews, and mine will probably be a bit unusual because I'm a bit unusual, but we'll just let it go and see where it takes us.
All right, sounds good. Question number 1. What was the best advice ever given to you? Would you modify it at all today?
Well, I think the best overall advice was something that my father said to me probably 100 times, at least, maybe 2 or 3 times that many. But it was one of his favorite sayings, and that was, anything worth doing is worth doing right. And particularly I was like, mostly, I guess when I heard that, I was like 10 or 12 or 13, a time when most children are not real plugged in to doing things right. They generally are doing things to do as little work as possible and get the job done so they can go play or that sort of thing. So I heard that a lot, and I think I wouldn't change it at all. I think that's a very important perspective on life, that we stay kind of in the moment, connected to what we're doing, and even more important, why we're doing it, and that we do it well, whatever it is, whether it's something that is hugely meaningful or whether it's just, making the dishes clean, or putting things away, that it should be done well. Also, I'd say it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. If who you are is good, what you will do will fall out successfully and be good all by itself. So you don't have to really monitor your behavior, like what should I do? How should I act? Just first get your head straight, get rid of your fear, get rid of your beliefs, get rid of your ego, and then just act natural. And that will be the optimum way for you to proceed through the world, is just being normal. So trying to police our own speech or our own actions, what we do, constantly saying, am I doing it right? It's hitting on the wrong thing. It's trying to modify your can I say, it's trying to modify your presentation, your image, let's see, there's a word I'm looking for here that's missing me, or that I'm missing, but it's about acting rather than about being. So that's what I'm trying to say. So acting your way through life is really not that helpful. It may be civilizing to other people, but it's not actually growth-inducing. There's a difference between being kind and acting kind. So acting is not what we want. So policing our behavior is not really a good idea. So that all kind of falls into this thing about anything worth doing is worth doing right. You do it because it's right, not because you think you should be doing it necessarily, or whether you're obligated to do it or it's duty you do it, but you do things because it's the right thing to do. And then when you do them, you put your whole self into it and do it well. So general advice from my dad that I thought was worth taking on to the rest of my life.
Yeah, that reminds me of a phrase that my dad often said to me was doing, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time, so you don't have to go back and redo it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that also applies to speed. I tend to do everything slowly because I tend to be into what I'm doing, and doing it for a purpose. And I find that if I try to be fast and just get the job done as quickly as possible, I tend to don't do it as well, and I make a lot of mistakes. And then I have to go back and fix the mistakes. And I found out that being slowly and doing it slowly, for me anyway, is actually more efficient. I get to the finish line, like the tortoise that just keeps, trudging on. I get to the finish line, but if I try to be the rabbit and go real fast, I tend to make so many mistakes that I spend more time correcting mistakes than I do making progress. So my approach to life is one that's generally slow and methodical and purposeful.
That allows space and gives us the opportunity to act with intention in everything that we do also.
Yes.
Goes back to speak to your point about not acting in general. Like, we don't want to act our life out. We want to be genuine and actually,
exactly,
radiate these feelings of love and care, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's easy to say, but it's a lot harder to do. Most people go through life with an image, and not just an image they project, but an image that they believe in, an image that they believe is them. But it's trying to say the right thing, be the right person, trying to do what they think other people expect of them. And though there's nothing wrong with trying to do the right thing, but you need to do it for the right reasons. Doing it because you think it's right is different than doing it because you want to please other people or other people think you should. There's just a difference there. That's part of that difference between the acting and the being. So most people who have fear and ego and beliefs tend to act through a persona and not really be authentic. Being authentic means that you really share who you are at the very basic level, rather than do what you think other people would expect you to do. That's not who you are necessarily. Could be, but unless you get authentic, you really won't know.
I'm really I've been fascinated with the question of who we are and being able to define that and how it kind of sets the tone for how we react to everything else in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's much easier to kind of navigate when you have that question figured out of who we are really and not who we're told to be.
Yeah. Yes, and that who we are is not it's not an answer that stays the same all the time. We change. We become different things, which is good. We grow. We evolve. In my own dialect, we evolve the quality of our consciousness. We become better, more, and it's always changing. I think the idea is, Bill, that you do your best to do the right thing, the thing that's you, the authentic thing, what is you, and you do that, and then you have to pay attention to how the chips fall when you do that. How does that affect other people? Not only how does that affect you, but how does that affect everyone else connected to you, other people and the people connected to the other people you're connected to? And if you look at that and say, well, that turned out pretty well, good, keep on doing more of that. But if you look at it and say, I could have done that better, that wasn't really the optimal choice, then you grow, you change who you are. So the state of being authentic is not a place you get to and stay, but it's a kind of an attitude about life, in that you be yourself, you be honest with yourself and with others. And if that honesty tends to create problems, creates entropy, creates dissatisfaction, creates arguments, then you need to reevaluate it, look at it and say, well, maybe that's not such a good way to be. And then you change who you are. You say, well, I don't want to be that way anymore, so then you change. So that authentic self is a thing that's a work in process all the time. So it's just a matter of being honest with yourself and honest with others, and then looking at how that plays out in the world. How does that affect people? Is it all about you, or is it about others? And if it's all about you, then you'll find that it'll end up starting arguments and causing people to be unhappy and that sort of thing. If it's about others, then mostly it'll be good. So that's, being authentic is always a work in progress.
It also kind of speaks to forgiveness, because in our observations of how our actions affect others and how they make us feel in turn upon, observing them and doing some introspection, I think that that necessitates a need or a vehicle to change and kind of reauthor our past, and to forgive ourselves for acting that way first, and then, instead of seeking forgiveness from outside, because that's one thing that I've struggled with is learning to forgive myself, as opposed to, looking for validation or looking for how you should be from outside sources.
Yeah, well, that is a good way to look at it. And I agree with that. In my own mindset, it's not so much about forgiveness as it is, for me, forgiving myself. It's about realizing that life is about growing. Life is about changing. It's about becoming. So if you feel like you can't make a choice because you're not sure what's right, then you take your best guess at what's right. Due diligence, you study it, you think about it, and then you make your best choice. And then you see how that plays. If it doesn't work well, and you realize it wasn't such a good choice, you analyze why. Why wasn't it a good choice? What was the problem? And why did I make that choice? Why did I think that was the best choice? What was I missing? What was wrong? And then you change it, and then you go on. And this is how we grow. This is the whole, this is the way we evolve, is that we try things, we see how they work, and then we make adjustments. Not adjustments to the outside world, but adjustments to ourselves. We change ourselves, and then we go on. So making a mistake should not be seen as a really big problem. It should be seen as part of the way life works. We make mistakes because we're not perfect. We're not grown up yet. So if you make a mistake, I'd say there's no points lost there. That's not a problem. The only problem is if you don't learn from that mistake and you make it again, and then you make it again. Now that's a problem. But making a mistake is not a problem. So I don't really find that I need to forgive myself unless I keep making mistakes over, and then I just try harder. I say, whoops, I'm trying to change that, but I'm not being successful. I need to try harder. So making mistakes are fine. It's part of the process of our evolution. So I'd tell your listeners, never, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Do your due diligence. Think about it. Don't just be cavalier. But when you've made up your mind, then go do it. And do it, like you mean it. And then see how it works. And if it doesn't work well, change yourself. Figure out, why did I do that? Why did I get that wrong? Why did I not understand that this problem would be created by my choice? And then fix yourself. So I very seldom find myself in a place that I need self-forgiveness, not because I don't make mistakes. I make plenty of mistakes. It's that I see a mistake as an opportunity, a good thing. I need to make that mistake. Otherwise, if I didn't, I wouldn't see how it is I needed to change. So I see mistakes as really positive things, as long as we as long as we grow from them.
It's kind of like the whole obstacle becomes the way type.
Yes.
And it's
Mhm.
for our benefit. Things happen for us, not to us. It's something that I was kind of reflecting on earlier this morning. And if we can see that as an opportunity for growth, then that's amazing. And it's not such a bad thing anymore, right?
Right.
Adam, did you have any thoughts?
No, I love this just because it speaks to me just of awareness, just being completely aware of things and recognizing patterns and things that have happened and kind of making roadmaps. You know, if you don't know where a current is, it's not making a mistake. You just need to find out where that boundary is. The problem is if you don't remember where it is and you keep swimming into the same current. But yeah, it's, you know, it seems difficult, but mistakes are really just being aware of your environment and finding the best efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that way everything stays positive. You see, you don't create any negatives. You don't really ever do things that you need forgiveness for because everything you do is well-intentioned, mm-hmm. and it becomes a learning point if it doesn't work out well. So it's always positive. Instead of defining things as negative, oh, that was a horrible thing, shame on me. You know, well, there's really no shame. It's just, oh, well, that's me. That's where I am. Yeah, that's as much as my understanding can carry me. But now I have to learn more. So I think it's a very positive way and a healthy way to kind of deal with your life rather than being judgmental even about yourself. It's more a matter of how do I grow? What do I learn from this?
It's a much more useful framework to operate in.
Yeah.
Concerned about self-development. Moving on to question 2. What do you willfully ignore?
That's different than my question 2, but we'll just do your question 2. What do you willfully ignore? I ignore things that are negative for the most part. I don't give them a lot of my attention, and I don't react to them very much. So in one way, I'd say I don't ignore anything. I'm aware of everything that's going on around me. I don't just push things out. By that, that sense of ignore, I don't do. But what do I not pay attention to? What doesn't grip me? And that would be things that are negative. For instance, I haven't watched commercial TV for probably 50 years because most of what's on it is negative. I do kind of keep up with things, but not really by watching news so much. I figure if something really important is happening in the world, I'll hear about it. I don't feel a need to keep up with it, minute by minute and day by day. It's too much negativity. So that would be what I ignore mostly. It's not profitable really to react to negativity.
Especially when it's put in front of you on 24-hour news cycle too.
Yeah. So it's just better to just leave it alone, ignore it than not react to it. The reactions to negativity are not helpful. If you react because it upsets you or bothers you, then that's a problem. If you react to it by trying to explain the source of negativity that they shouldn't be so negative, well, that just creates more problems. You don't change people by lecturing to them. So there really isn't much that you can react to that is positive to the negativity that you find in the world. You just have to let it be. It is what it is. If it's in yourself, that's different. Now you can change it. But if it's outside yourself, then it's not something you can just reach out and change. Nor should you reach out and change it. It's the way people are, and they need to also be authentic and be who they are.
Yeah, I apologize for the mix-up in questions. What did you have for question 2? I'm just curious.
My question 2 was, what was the most important lesson you learned from your parents?
Okay. I understand where the mix-up is. I have been trying to put this interview together for quite some time, and we did switch the order of the questions up beginning of this year, I believe, or maybe even earlier. So they will be. Some of them are the same, and some of them are different. So I guess we'll just kind of wing it. But
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Adam, did you have any thoughts before we move on to the third one?
Nope.
All right. Question number 3. What book has been most influential on your life and why?
Well, it's probably not what you were asking, but it is the true answer, and that is the book I wrote, My Big Toe, a trilogy of books. That has been the most influential in the sense that it has changed everything for me. After I wrote those books, then my life kind of took a very different path than it had up to that time. So it was, as far as the effect it had on me and my life and what I'm doing and where I am now and so on, it changed everything. When you write a book that basically is a theory of everything, then that's pretty broad. And that means you have to answer questions, about everything. And the answers are not so difficult, but putting the answers in a form that actually communicate, that actually people can understand and do something with it, that's a challenge. And as after I published those books, my growth and understanding kept right on growing. That's not where I stopped. That's just kind of where I started. That's where I pulled it all together into a coherent, set of ideas, and that was more of the beginning than the end. So that had a big effect on, why I am where I am today, was because I decided to write and then publish those books. I've learned a lot since then, understood a lot since then, just because that's now what I do, is I think about the nature of reality and life and people and circumstances and ask the question, like any good scientist should, is why? Why is it like that? Why does it work that way? Why are people like that? Why do they work that way? It's that sort of thing. So it's all become more coherent, and it's all kind of settled and focused, and that's been good. So that's probably really not what you intended with that. Other than that, to get back to maybe what you intended, is the things that influenced me most when I was younger were probably the existential writers of the 50s and 60s, like Samuel Beckett, Albert Camus, poetry of all sorts. And I like those things, even as a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old, I was drawn to those things because it prodded me to think in terms of bigger pictures. The people who wrote those books seemed to be concerned with the nature of reality and the world and people and being and in it and how to be and what we are and what we need to be. And I found that big picture thinking to be very attractive.
Absolutely. I mean, it gets my attention a lot too. And I love that your answer is the My Big Toe trilogy, because absolutely, I mean, our own creative works have the biggest impact on us. So it absolutely, that makes sense. We've only had one other guest in my time with the show that gave an answer of books that he wrote, and that was Mark Sloan, and his 2 books were on cancer and how that disease is misconstrued and its effect on the metabolism of the body. But for people that are maybe unfamiliar with the trilogy, do you want to kind of give a synopsis of what they can find in each of the 3 books?
Well, sure. The My Big Toe trilogy is fundamentally, it's a theory of consciousness. And it came from my, 35 years of exploring consciousness from the inside, not studying other people's consciousness, but exploring my own. And when I was in my middle to late 20s, I teamed up with Bob Monroe, who wrote Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and then Ultimate Journey. And he taught me how to explore consciousness, how to go out of body, how to do things there. And I could do that on demand. And I could do it in such a precise way that I could go precisely right back to the same altered state, again and again and again. So I got to the point that I had enough control over it that I could start doing research there, finding out how things work. Why do they work that way? What are the limitations? What can consciousness do? And what can it do? And why? Why does it have limitations? And where do they come from? And there's information out there. Where does that information come from? And what's the source? So after about 35 years of that, I thought I'd come to an understanding that made sense to me. So I put it in these books. So it was mostly a theory of consciousness. But because one of the facts of consciousness that I learned in that research was that consciousness is fundamental and that the physical world is a derivative of consciousness. Consciousness is the thing that's real. Everything else is virtual. And because of that, I knew that this theory of consciousness should be able to derive physics. And chemistry and biology, science should be derivable from an understanding of consciousness. And about 2 years after I published the books, I realized that I understood that. It got an aha moment, and a few things fell into place. And I realized that I could derive quantum physics from basic principles based on, the theory of consciousness. And I could derive relativity from basic principles. And I could answer all the mysteries, the paradoxes that are in physics. And there's dozens of paradoxes in physics where physics says, well, we know the world works this way. Experiments tell us that this is the way the world is, but we have no idea why it's that way. It doesn't make sense. It's a paradox. And all of those paradoxes just fell out with very easy, straightforward explanations after that. So what you'll find if you read My Big Tao is that it is a logical book. It's science. Now, the exception to that is the very first section of the first book, and that's just a story of how I came to end up, being able to write that book. So that's just a story, and you can skip that and wouldn't miss anything, except maybe some context. But after that, it's logical, and it's a book of science, and in the sense that everything that I say is part of a logical progression. So what you learn in the second section is necessary to learn what's in the third, which is necessary to learn what's in the fourth. So it's just a logical progression. And I wrote it as an on-ramp for all the people in the world who are left brain dominant, who are logical process people. If it doesn't make sense and they don't see the logic in it, then they can't go there. They can't read it. For all the people that are more right-brained and holistic and intuitive, there's literally thousands of books to read. Just go to the philosophy shelf and you will find all sorts of things that speak to that sort of holistic understanding and things that are intuitive. But for a scientist, a mathematician, an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, lots of people, a plumber, a carpenter, people who have to think their way through every day. They have to solve problems. It's all about logical process. And those people will, pick up they probably would never pick up a Bhagavad Gita, but if somebody handed it to them and they started to read it, it'd be some guy on a chariot, talking nonsense, and they just wouldn't be able to deal with that. They'd say, where's the beef? Where's the logic? What's being said here? And they'd say, oh, that's, belief stuff. Or they would look at it and say, that's poetry that could be interpreted in 10 different ways. It's not precise. I can't use it. And they'll throw it away and won't read it, and they'll never learn any of the lessons that are in there. They won't understand the beauty and the value of that sort of thing. So I wanted my books to be an on-ramp for those people that demand logical process or they can't get through. So if you read my books and follow them, and they're a little hard to read because they are logical process. So it's not like reading a story after you get past that first section of my background. After that, you have to think about it. And how does this apply to me? And what does this actually mean, in the big picture? You have to think your way through it. But you'll find yourself in that same place of understanding that life is not just this objective world. That's just a small part. Not only a small part, but it's the less interesting and the less meaningful part is the objective part. That the more meaningful and more exciting and more, a substantive part is the subjective part. That's where all the important things are. Beauty and love and consideration and caring and all those things are subjective. And relationship, all of that's very subjective. But that's where the rubber really meets the road in our life. It's not the stuff, that's in the world. That's just the props on the stage. It's us, the actors, and how we react and how we interact and what we're trying to do and what our intentions are and what is our quality. That's the important part, and all of that's subjective. So this model will give you a better physics. It'll derive physics in a way that's more general. It solves Einstein's problem of the what is it that is above, or is more general to both quantum physics and relativity. That overarching idea from which both of those sciences can be derived. It solves that problem. Plus, it is also a science of the subjective. So all these things that are subjective, you can understand how they work. What's the mechanics of the subjective world as well? So I recommend it to those left-brainers who live out of their heads in logical process, because it will take them to a totally different viewpoint of reality and a totally different viewpoint of the world, and give them some appreciation for life beyond the mere materialistic.
Is there a particular core thing of consciousness that people are drawn to, kind of like that first step that you use in showing somebody that mirror to break them into that, different understanding out of that logic? Because I assume just, as we come from the conscious, there's a natural connection somehow.
Well, yes, there is a natural connection we have with consciousness. There's a few fundamental things that people have that they have just because they're part of this larger consciousness system, is what I call source. That's my metaphor for source, is the larger consciousness system. We're all pieces of this system, and we're here for a purpose. And that purpose is to lower our entropy, but what that really means in practical terms is to become love, to care, to cooperate, to share, to make it more about other than about self, get rid of our fear. And everybody comes with a sense of wanting to do things to improve who they are, to grow, to become more. We have that planted inside of us as a fundamental drive to improve who we are, what we are, our situation. And that drive is there because we're in this virtual reality entropy reduction trainer. And I'm probably saying things that most people won't be able to connect those dots. So I'll try to stay away from that. But we're here to grow up, and that's part of it. We're also all netted. All consciousness is connected to all other consciousness, just like we're all netted on the internet. That doesn't mean every website on the internet is playing on your computer. It just means that you have access to all the other consciousness. You can connect, and you can click the little, X in the upper right-hand corner to go away from it. You can do either one. You can open a port or close the port. So in the book, I don't start with trying to convince anybody of anything. I start with just the assumptions that one, consciousness exists, and two, that evolution exists. And then I start with the simplest piece of consciousness, which is, I define consciousness as awareness with a choice. And I start with the simplest piece of consciousness, which is something that is aware that it can be in state A and state B, and it has a choice. So it can't get any simpler than that. And from that, I let that evolve. And it evolves into a system, and it evolves eventually into what we call the larger consciousness system. And I show logically then every step being not something that could be, but something that logically is necessary. It has to be. It has to be this way. And as you follow it has to be this way, you end up then with a complete system that explains physics and explains philosophy and explains both the objective and subjective worlds. So I start like most left-brain people would like. I start with a couple of assumptions, and then I work my way out logically from that. I'm not sure I understood your question.
Oh, no, you answered it
well, Adam,
perfectly. No, you did.
I?
And and I'm so glad you went there, because the reduction in entropy makes sense to me. I mean, just from, that means from a logical, even physics standpoint, everything is evolving. Everything is working towards this. The universe truly is conspiring towards, balance and things working more efficiently. So, I'm definitely glad you went there.
Yeah, okay.
You had mentioned Robert Monroe earlier, and I'm familiar with the Monroe Institute and the Gateway experience.
Mm-hmm.
I found that on YouTube a number of years ago and kind of experimented with it. Is there anything? What was your first experience going out of body? Was that anything that Bob Monroe had? Did he teach you how to do that? Did you discover it together? When I tried it, I felt like I was like a piece of tape, and I was being pulled up from both ends. And the last part that was to come off unpeeled was by my belly button. But I didn't get that far. Is that anything that you can speak to? Or?
Sure, I can address that. My interaction with Bob Monroe was probably about a decade before there was such a thing as the Monroe Institute, or a TMI. It was, at that time, matter of fact, the land and the facility that TMI's on, Bob didn't even own that. That wasn't in the picture at all. So when I met Bob, he had, not that long ago, probably the last 5 or 6 years, he had written the first book, Journeys Out of the Body. And he built a building as a lab to study consciousness, because he didn't want to just be the guy that had some weird stuff happen. He wanted to study it, make it real, make it understandable, something that he could teach others to do. He wanted to put it on a kind of a rational map. And he was looking for some scientists to help man this lab, but he really didn't have a lab. It was just a building, build it and they will come. Well, I was the one that came, and I was there at the right time, at the right moment, lucky me. And I'm a physicist, and I had learned to meditate for transcendental meditation while I was in graduate school. So I was aware that consciousness was another dimension, in which we could operate. So I was open to it. So I started going out to see Bob by 15 to 20 hours a week, myself, an electrical engineer, a friend of mine. And right away, our deal with Bob was, we'll be free scientists, and we'll, try to accomplish what you want, but you need to teach us what you do, because we don't want to study it from the, looking at you and studying your consciousness. We need to experience it, or it's not going to be real for us. So he agreed with that. And we'd go out, we'd work in the lab, build equipment, come up with experiments, do things from about 7 o'clock in the evening to about 10. And then Bob would come around 10, and then we'd get in the booths, and Bob would teach us about going out of body for another 2 hours or so. And then we'd all go down to Bob's house and hang out and talk and discuss, and what could we try next, and where we were going, and that kind of thing. And then at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, Dennis and I would go home, and then I'd lie in my bed and practice all the things that I'd learned that day. And then I'd wake up, I'd get up, maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep, go to work. And that was my life then. It was pretty intense. And I spent a lot of hours in altered states of consciousness with Bob. And the way it worked is we had a microphone just suspended just above our lips. We were lying down in a little cubicle that was acoustically and electromagnetically isolated. So you couldn't hear, and mine was a Faraday cage. It was a solid sheet metal welded all the way around on all sides to block out any E&M fields that would be there. So in any case, he would teach us. So within, I don't know, 6 months to a year, both Dennis and I were able to go out of body on demand whenever we wanted to. And mainly what we did was collect evidence, because both of us were hardcore techies, and we needed evidence that what we were doing wasn't just in our minds. It wasn't our imagination. We were actually doing something real. The information we were getting was coming from outside of us, not created inside of us. So we did all the most evidential things you could do, like remote viewing. What's going on in this remote location, and then check out and see if that's what was going on there. Connecting with people. We'd sometimes try to read the headline of the local newspaper, what it was going to be a week later. We could see if we could do some probable future things. We read numbers on the blackboard that Bob would put up after we were locked in our check units. Just anything that was evidential. And at the end of that, we had probably, 10, 20,000 to 1 probability that what we were doing was external to us. If you just kept the kind of statistics of things that we were doing, we were doing healing, using our minds to heal people. But both of us still were very resistant to the idea that it's real, because, convincing yourself at the intellectual level is different than convincing yourself at a gut level, at an intuitive level. And that didn't happen for Dennis and I until Bob came up with an experiment for us to go out of body together. And we were both to slip out of our bodies, go up above the lab, meet there, and go off on an adventure. And the only rule was stay together. And then Bob was recording everything we said, because the way we went out of body was we kept a constant stream of consciousness going to Bob, so he knew what we were doing. Otherwise, he couldn't guide us if he didn't know what we were experiencing. Talking about it afterwards, not the same thing as working with it as it's happening. So he recorded both me and Dennis and the things that we were saying to him. Now, Dennis and I never were able to talk to each other directly, only through the out of body, only while we were out of body, through the mind-to-mind link there. Bob had a channel to both of us, but we were never patched together. So Bob had recorded those things, and after we got out, he played the two tapes simultaneously. He rewound them and then flipped them on together so they'd be synced in time. And there was Dennis and I having conversations with each other and seeing the same things and talking about, the same things. And it was obvious to me at that point. And from then on, I never asked the question, is it real? That was done. I was past that point of wondering whether it was real, and I actually got it at the intuitive gut level that it was real. And that probably, took about a week or two to just absorb that. I kind of wandered in a haze for a couple of weeks, and oh my God, this is real, that kind of an attitude. But I didn't question it anymore. I realized it was real. Now, what my desire was is to figure it out. I'm a scientist. That's what I do. I try to model reality, and I wanted to understand, okay, so it's real. It's also structured. It's not just randomness. You don't do random things. You do things because you have an intent. Intent is the guiding force. And why is that, and how does it work? So then's when I started doing the experiments in the non-physical to try to understand how this thing worked, which then led to the book that we talked about. So, Bob and Dennis and I were almost a decade before TMI. And, after TMI got along, spending 20 hours a week with Bob would have been impossible. Matter of fact, TMI actually became a thing, was an idea, became a concept, because Dennis and I found a technology called binaural beats that worked really well to entrain brainwaves. In other words, it made people who were not actively meditators, they put them in states that would normally take people maybe 5 or 10 years of meditation to be able to do that. It put them in a theta state, and it held them there so they didn't wander out of it. So that allowed us to teach other people. And once it got around in the community that we were successful in teaching people and having people experience out of bodies and other things like that, suddenly there were lots and lots of knocks on the door who wanted that. And then the whole process turned into Dennis and I being trainers rather than being researchers. And eventually it was too busy. We couldn't do it. I mean, we had wives and families and full-time jobs, and it just wasn't something that we wanted to be. So that was probably about 1980 or so, very late 70s or 80s, that Dennis and I kind of slipped out the back, and other people took over, and the Monroe Institute then found what he called the new land, as Bob called it, and that's where TMI is built now. So that's sort of my connection with Bob, and it was at Whistlefield Farms, was where Bob was at the time. So yes, that was a big chunk of my life, and that was another one of those things that changed. It was very influential in my life, was that I met up with Bob Monroe and started off this adventure in trying to make science out of my experiences in consciousness.
So is the binaural beats then, is that the protocol or method that you still teach to other people to get them out of body?
Well, I still use that as a tool. No, it's just a tool, and it's a tool to help people be able to get into specific altered states and stay there. And you don't need that tool. You can just learn to meditate, gain control of your consciousness and your mental state such that you can put yourself in a theta state and stay there. But that takes practice. And most people do not come to this with that much practice. So when I give courses, I have a course out now that's all audio. You just download the audio, and it's like a 5-day course, and it'll teach you how to do all the paranormal things. And it has a set of binaural beats that go with it. Or you can buy those binaural beats if you go to my website, you'll find out how to do that. And it costs like $25 or something. You get 14 binaural beats. So it's not very expensive. And then you can listen to those. Some people like them at different bass frequencies. And so it's a whole selection of different binaural beats that you can have. And they're all created by me. These are binaural beats that I generated myself just for this course. So that's an available thing. But yes, I do use it, and it's very helpful. I tell people you don't have to use them. But if you find them helpful, well, it's a tool you can use, so use them. But eventually, you need to take them off and not use the tool. It's like training wheels on a bicycle. Well, training wheels are very helpful for a 5 or 6-year-old because it keeps them from falling over and hurting themselves and making it hard for them to get back on the bike and make them fearful. So the bike will never fall over because they've got the little training wheels on the back. So that's good for their confidence, and it's good for helping them learn how to balance on a bike, but it limits them. You'll never be a really good bike rider if you always have training wheels on the back of your bike. You can't corner very well. There's a lot of things you can't do. So it's the same way. The binaural beats are a great training aid, but eventually you outgrow them, and they kind of lock you into a space where you really need more flexibility than that. So it's a great training aid, but it's also a trap in the end, in that like crutches, it's a great thing if your foot doesn't work, but if you have to throw away the crutches eventually, or you'll not get better past a certain point. And it's the same with the binaural beats. So use them as if you need them, but don't hang on to them forever. You have to eventually let them go.
And that's addressed in your course too.
Yeah, the binaural beats and how they work and whatever. That's all there.
Okay, awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out. That will be in the show notes for the listener. But I think we're going to move on to question 4, which is, what rule do you have for yourself that you never break? Why do you think that it's important?
Okay, let me see. Well, I can't find that in my order, but that's all right. I'll just talk to it anyway. The rule I have is basically never be negative. If you don't have something positive to say, don't say anything at all. Just be quiet. So try to never be negative about anything. And if you find yourself being negative, just stop and let it go and think about it like, well, I don't really want to be that way. So that would be my rule. Now, I don't have a lot of rituals or anything that I do. I don't have, I don't know, maybe that's another question. I don't have, particularly habits and things that I do all the time. But that is probably the closest thing to a rule that I would have, is just don't be negative. Negative turns out to not be helpful. Now, if you see that somebody is, holding the wrong end of the hammer and they're having trouble hammering with the wooden stick, I don't mean that you shouldn't step in and maybe help them learn something. It's not that you can't say things to people. Say, I think you would do better if you held the other end of that hammer and used the metal part to hit the nail. Well, that's fine. But you have to do it in a way that's positive. And you have to not just, hey, you're doing it wrong, I'll show you how. That is not the way to approach that sort of thing. You have to see if they really want you to help them first. If they don't, then you need to leave them alone. And you have to help them in a way that's really helpful for them, not just, giving them instructions. You have to help them understand. So basically, never be negative.
That speaks to being the observer, right? And monitoring how we affect other people and how we make ourselves feel, and recognizing that pattern and being able to and stop being negative, right?
Yes.
Question number 5. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most?
What would that be? Okay. Yeah, I jotted down some little notes for these. That's why I'm trying to find them. If I could, I'm looking for a question. Yeah, okay. That's number 5 for me. Well, for one, I don't really have best friends. I just have friends. So I don't put my friends on a hierarchy of which are best or, not so much. So friends are just friends. They're people I interact with. There's people I enjoy. They're people that I share my time with. And I suspect that if I asked each one, what would I work on most? Each one would say something different, because what they would think I need to work on most is really a reflection of them. We get information, and then we interpret that information, and we interpret it in terms of our own beliefs, our own ego, our fears, our understanding, our love. We interpret it. So I think everyone would probably have something different to tell me if I said that. And it would reflect them probably as much, if not more, as it would me. Well, here would be a good example, kind of maybe a little fun. My wife would easily fit that description of my best friend. Okay, I spend more time with her than anybody else and enjoy the time I spend with her. But I actually would like to spend more time with her. I'm busier than I'd like to be. We thought when we retired that we would just kind of hang out together and it would just be all fun, but she's working hard, I'm working hard, and we still need to find a way to retire from retiring and spend more time with each other. But anyway, if I were to ask her what she would think I should work on most, she would likely suggest that I need to become more obedient. But that's not necessarily because I need to become more obedient. It's because that would make her life easier, is why she would say that. So anyway, I can't really come up with much for you there. I don't know that, I can't think of anything in general that people would say about me that they would, what I should work on.
No, I think that's a great answer. The not ranking your friends, right? You don't have a best friend. I think that speaks to not putting anybody on a pedestal, which is something I usually kind of try to keep in the back of my mind when we get to the role model question later. I just have this kind of I don't know, not default way of speaking, but just a little, snippet way back here for when that question is. But I didn't think to apply it to friends, so I definitely
Yeah. Well, basically, the way I work is that if anyone, friend or not friend, even if it's somebody I just met, if anyone offers me advice, I think you should do this, or, this, not only the way I am, but the things that I present or how I present them, or the models that I have. If anybody has a suggestion or a criticism or an idea for change, I listen to it. I listen to what they're saying, and because I'm always looking for ways to improve. And then I see what I can get out of that. If there's anything, what can I take from that? Is it something that I think is a good idea or not? And then I do something with it. If it's a good idea, then I incorporate it. If I think it's probably something they're saying just because they don't really understand so much, what's going on, then I just let it go. So I appreciate all of it, but I don't necessarily act on all of it or accept all of it. I just accept those things that have value to me and let the rest go. But I think everybody, I give everybody the right to throw in their 2 cents, of what I could do better, and I welcome that. But I don't necessarily take it. I don't necessarily reject it. I think about it, and some of it I keep, and some of it I let go. So it's not. I don't think it's things that. I don't think there's anything that most people would say that would be the same thing, other than perhaps that I need to become more obedient. I'm a very fluid kind of person. I don't have a lot of habits or rituals or things that peg me to be one way or another, and I can be, I guess, a little difficult to live with in that sense, that I'm very independent and think for myself and consider others, but don't follow very often.
Question number 6. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Well, what kind of turns me on most is being helpful to people. If I can say something or do something that actually helps people understand themselves and who they are and what they're doing and why they're doing it, if I can help them learn something or come to some understanding, then I like doing that. It's the thing that pleases me. That's where I get my energy from. I stand up in front of 100 people and talk, and I talk for sometimes 5 days, 8 hours a day, stand up and talk for 8 hours a day for 5 straight days. And then it usually goes on into the evening, and people wonder, where does all that energy come from? But that's not taking energy from me at all. It's giving me energy. Because as I interact with people, if I feel that I'm being useful to them in some way, helping them accomplish something they want to accomplish, then that's what I feed on. That's what makes me keep going and makes me want to do it again. So that's basically where I get the positives in my life, what I like to do. So I have a lot of understanding and information and experience that's unusual. And in any way that I can help others achieve some understanding on their own, not necessarily help them achieve my understanding. That's not the point. Giving them my understanding is not really useful to them. I need to give them tools so they can get to their answers on their own. It's not, if they just want to copy my understanding, then that makes them a believer. And belief is a problem. One of my slogans is believe nothing. Be skeptical of everything. And I don't want people just to listen to what I say and believe it. I want them to experience it, understand it, grow it from the inside out. And as much as I can be part of that process, that is what keeps me here, interacting with people, doing what we're just doing right now. And in some part, that's probably true of you too. The reason you're doing this is because you're going to publish this stuff. You're not going to go home and and listen to it yourself. You're going to put it out there for people to look at it, and when they do, your ideas that'll be helpful to them. They'll gain some insights. They'll gain some different ways of seeing the world, or thinking about things, or understanding, and that's what makes you put in the time to sit here and ask these questions and get the answers and edit the video, because it's a matter of being useful to people, and that's the way I feel.
Absolutely. It's very much a labor of love. And when you have a passion for something and you're involved in the creative aspect of your mind, it's very, very much satisfying. And one of the taglines of another podcast I'm a big fan of is belief is the enemy of knowledge. That's something that
Yes, absolutely. My book, I call that a belief trap, because as soon as you have a belief, it creates a boundary beyond which you can receive, you won't receive any new information, because you will automatically reject any information that's at odds with your belief. So it puts a blinder on you, belief blindness. So believing anything is not a good idea.
And even if you kind of break down the word, that's got the belief, it's got the word lie in it too.
Yeah. Belief, yeah, and disbelief is just another form of belief. So it doesn't matter, whether you disbelieve something or believe it. It all falls in the same basket. It's a belief, just a positive or negative belief, and it's all dysfunctional. You need to stay open-minded, and you need to stay skeptical, both, all the time. And if you do that, then you'll probably end up at the right place eventually.
Question number 7. What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
Humbling. We'll do that first. Probably the most humbling thing in my life that was kind of key to, I guess, the way I am, was my first step into the wider world as an adult on my own, which would be my first semester of college. You leave home, and you leave that structure where you have parents that give you guidance and have more experience than you do, and the structure in society that's built up around you to kind of keep you on a productive path. And when I was 5 or 6 hours, 10 hours away from home by car, and no parents, just me and a whole bunch of other kids, and we're all on our own to make it or not make it, that was very humbling, because I had very little confidence that I was well prepared. I didn't feel confident going in. Oh, I've got a great education so far. I went to a great school. I didn't go to a great school. I went to a terrible school. It was the one that served where I lived, but it was pretty poor. And it was the place that in the county I lived in, all the teachers that kind of failed were sent to this one school, because it was just a little country school, and most of the people there were non-academic. Most of the people there were farmers or worked in a local factory. So it was not really an academic place so much. It was a very small group of us out of the whole school. My class that was in the academic was like 20 people, was everybody in the school. And out of those 20, I and one other people went to college afterward. So it wasn't really college prep in anyway, and the teachers were pretty poor for the most part. So I knew when I got there that it was going to be an uphill battle. You know, I had a lot of catching up to do. So that was humbling because I was so unprepared. Now, what I did about it was that I worked 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, my entire first semester. I did nothing else in my life other than get some sleep and work on being successful as a student. You know, there was TVs in the lounge or whatever. I never looked at them even for a minute. You know, I didn't get involved in any extracurricular activities. I didn't sit around and talk and do a lot of chatting with my fellow students. I worked. When I wasn't sleeping and eating, I was working, and I did that for an entire semester. And at the end of that semester, I got a few B's and a few C's, nothing less than a C, but I don't think anything more than a B. I was kind of a C-B sort of a place, and I was pleased that I was just still there. I hadn't been sent packing yet, so I kept working all the rest of that year, but then after that freshman year was done, I got all A's and all B's and kept a really high grade point average and graduated with honors. So it turned out all right. But that first semester, actually the first 2 semesters, the first year was a very humbling experience. I felt very small and very inadequately prepared. And it was like a make it or break it, because you either succeed or all the rest of your life will be changed. You'll take a different path. You don't take the college path, you take the go out and get a job path. It would make a huge difference in where my life was going to go. So I was committed to it. So I think that was probably the most humbling moment that I came to. I can't really recall any major embarrassment that I had. I am very difficult to embarrass. Sometimes people, and I tell the people when I talk to them and give them, when I'm lecturing to them, I say, anything's on the table. Don't be afraid to ask me hard questions. If what you want to know is, why do you think all this stuff is real? And why, should I not believe that you're just crazy? And are you just trying to convince all of this? These are questions that most people won't ask because they feel it's impolite to ask those kinds of questions. And I tell people that if it's a serious question, if it's something that is honest, you're not just being a smart aleck or being clever. If it's really a question you have, ask it, no matter whether you think it's maybe impolite or not. I don't mind impolite. I don't even mind rude, as long as it's real, if it's a real question. So I don't embarrass very easily because of the way I see life. I see life as mistakes are good. Mistakes are things that you learn from. So if I do something and it's foolish, well, I'd like somebody to tell me about it. I'd like somebody to point it out if I'm doing things like that. And rather than get embarrassed that I was foolish, I'm pleased to get the information. So I don't get embarrassed. I just consider the information and deal with it, because I believe that making mistakes is part of the learning process. I don't feel bad about making mistakes.
Yeah, it allows us to grow, right? We were just talking.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing to make a mistake.
No, it's to be aware of your mistake is a good thing. And if there's other people can help you become aware of that mistake, well, you appreciate that. And to become embarrassed about your mistake is like, I don't know, it's an image thing. Well, my image has just been tarnished, in front of other people. Well, that doesn't happen if you don't have an image. If you're just an authentic person, then you don't have an image, and there's nothing really to get tarnished in front of people, and you really don't care a whole lot what people think, other than if they have something interesting to tell you, whether it's critical or positive or negative or whatever, that you're open to hearing it. So with that attitude, then embarrassment generally just doesn't happen.
Question number 8. What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it if you have?
Well, we just talked about that, and that was that I would fail when I went to college. That was probably a fear that I had, and I overcome it by working 18 hours a day. Generally, I don't have many fears because I've always had the attitude, even as a teenager, again, that life just is. Things happen, and you get to deal with it. And that's what life is all about. Stuff happens. And it doesn't matter that much what the stuff is that happens. All kinds of things can happen. Good things, bad things, terrible things, embarrassing things, things that would embarrass people, mistakes. Everything happens, but that's not really what's important. What's important is, how do you deal with that thing? Do you deal with it positively? Do you deal with it in a way that's useful to yourself and other people? That's what's important. So I don't get hung up on the significance of the stuff that happens. So it's, again, I guess I'm a bit unusual that way because I felt that way for a very long time. So it's just kind of an ingrained part of who I am. That's what partly also makes me hard to embarrass. That's also why it's probably why my wife thinks it would be better if I were more obedient. Makes me hard to manipulate too, and hard to control. So it's just, I'm just not all that impressed with the things that happen, even really bad things. Sometimes bad things do happen, challenging things, difficult things, but you deal with them. And if you try to deal with it and it doesn't work out the way you want, well, then that's another thing you have to deal with. So you deal with that too. And you deal with everything in a positive way and you learn from it. And what's not good about that,
Learning lessons, asking questions, all good things, especially for this podcast because it's 13 questions. Question 9. What is your greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
Well, I think we've already kind of gone over that. My driving force in life is to be helpful, to be useful, to lower entropy locally, with the things I do, and more globally with the people I interact with. And that's basically what drives me to get up every morning and have fun. Yeah. Every day is fun. My life is generally I'm happy. I have a lot of joy and positive things in my life. I thought if I tried to think, what would I change in my life if I could change anything? I wouldn't change a thing. Everything in my life is just exactly the way it is, and that's great. And mostly it's all very happy, very joyous, and very positive. So there really wouldn't be anything that I would want to change. Even the things that were hardships, I wouldn't change because I learned so much from them.
Question 10. Who are or were your role models and why?
Well, I would have to say my father, of course. Every young man's father is probably his best and most powerful role model. As we grow up from being small, we guys tend to follow our father's attitudes and footsteps for a while. But other than that, I would say scientists, philosophers, poets, those kinds of people. I always particularly like science because it was certain, it was exact. It was challenging too, intellectually challenging to understand it, and good because once you understood it, you had an understanding of how the world worked better, why things are the way they are. Philosophers, because I was always interested in why people were the way they were. Philosophy, metaphysics, even as a 12 or 13-year-old. Those things were interesting to me, big picture things. Poets, because they had bigger pictures. They talked about feelings and ideas and reasons why. To me, the poets had, I don't know, different viewpoints of life, different aspects of being and existence, and you'd get those through poetry. And of course, like all poetry, you had to interpret it. It is what you made of it. But I generally enjoyed finding those meanings and seeing how they matched to my own experience. And if they said things beyond my experience, then I would log those in to see whether or not they would come true, whether life really was like that or not. So I found it kind of expanding. The philosophy and poetry were I engaged in just for expanding, and the science I engaged in basically for practice in logical process, for training myself to be methodical and look at all the details, because I needed that. I came into this world very right-brained and holistic in my viewpoints, and I needed to work hard at becoming meticulous at logical process and looking at details and understanding explanations for why things were, not just understanding that things were this way, but trying to understand why they were that way.
Do you remember a specific philosopher or book that you read, like the first one that really stuck out and popped out to you in your brain as you were first going through? I remember mine was the Rene Descartes. He did the whole "I think, therefore I am."
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was I first got to that in I think my freshman year in college, or maybe my sophomore year in college. I got to that, and yeah, that was impressive. But I think I'd call that I would say those. I told you the early books that I read. Like Camus and Beckett and those existential writers. That's kind of a philosophy. It was not just written art, but it was philosophy too. The nature of reality, what's important and what's not, what's reality all about. That was all very important to me because I wondered what reality was about. And of course, I applied all of it to myself. How does this affect me, kind of a thing. And so Beckett, what was the one I liked so much about Beckett? The guy was buried in sand up to his, first up to his knees. Then what was that called? It was, those books were as much poetry as they were anything else. As well as they were stories. You had to interpret what was meant by that. But that sort of the philosophy hit me first, and then later I got into some of the counterculture. Even in the 50s, there was a counterculture, and it was called the Beat Generation, and they were mostly in San Francisco, and there were some poets and some writers in that group, and I read all of that. So anybody who had bigger opinions on the nature of life and reality interested me.
Yeah, it's the ontological branch of philosophy. I'd say it's the relating to metaphysics and dealing with the nature of being. Regarding that topic is
that's kind of was my keenest interest.
Question number 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
Well, you had that, and also you had what quality do you most admire in a man, and I can answer both of those because they're basically the same. And it's the quality that I admire in human beings, I would say. And that is that he or she must be ethical and moral, sincere and authentic, honest, lack of ego, lack of fear, which means they put others first. And of course, if you're all of that, then of course you're not self-centered and you're not arrogant. You're not difficult to get along with. So that's basically what I admire in anybody. Ethic and moral is very important. Lie, cheat, and steal is not good. That's negative stuff. Caring, cooperative, empathetic, all those things are important to me. That they're authentic, that they're not just sharing their image they have of themselves with me, but they're sharing themselves, that they're always honest, that if they say it, it's because that's the way they feel, that's the way they are. And of course, that means if you're that way, then that means you don't have much ego and you don't have much fear and you're not self-centered. Because if you're self-centered and you have fear and ego, you're not going to be ethical and moral and sincere and authentic. So it's those are the people that I admire, and those are the people I like. Those are the people that I enjoy talking to, and like to spend time with.
Absolutely, it makes for the best conversation. One of the things Adam told me when I started booking guests for the show was, as long as that guest is going to be honest, it's going to be a great interview and conversation. And I found that to be true. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it. And it doesn't matter male or female. That's just the nature, it's just people. If people are like that. Now, males and females are very different, of course. They have their own ways of looking at reality and processing information. But that to me is just, that's just the way it is. That's it. You don't expect males and females to see things the same way, or to be the same way, or even process information the same way, or even get the same thing out of things that you do. So that makes them good. That's good. Diversity is important. We need different viewpoints. We need different attitudes, different ways of processing information. So it's very helpful to interact with both sexes, because you get a variety that way of different viewpoints, different ideas. And so it's more challenging to try to understand where that other person's coming from. If it's not your sex, it's harder to understand that, but that's very valuable. But so men and women all, to me, are fun to be with if they're honest and ethical.
Question number 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
I think it would be what I've seen. I would talk to, it's people who spend their lives cheerfully. That means no resentment, taking care of and giving to others. I had a friend, a very good friend, and he had his PhD in engineering. He had a business going, that he was key in. And his mother came down with Alzheimer's. And first it was his father came down with Alzheimer's. So he kind of let that business go and took care of his mother, took care of her needs, because she needed somebody to take care of her. And he took care of her until she died. And just about the time she was about to pass on, then the other of his parents, I can't remember, it was the mother or father first, but it was one first for about a decade, hung on for about 10 years and with Alzheimer's. And as soon as that one wound up, it was the other. And it was another 10 years. So he spent 20 years of his life, rather than working in his career, basically as caretaker for his parents, living on a shoestring, just enough to get by, just enough to have something to eat or to stay, in a house, sort of thing. And he dedicated his life to that. Now, he had an active life online. He was very intelligent. He was a smart guy. He was interactive with people in that way, because he couldn't leave home very long because people there needed him to be there. So he was a very fine person. And to me, that was exceptional courage to do what was right, rather than to do what was easy and what was self-satisfying, rather than what needed to be done. So he did not want to just shuffle these parents off into a place where people with Alzheimer's could, sit and rot, or vegetate. So he did that, and they weren't easy. Neither of his parents were easy to take care of. They both got hostile and angry. So it wasn't just that they were just kind of nice old people, didn't know what they were doing. They were challenging to him. And he grew a lot in that process because he learned to give. And he was very good at giving and caring about other people. So I kind of hold him up as one of the more courageous people that I've known to give that of himself. It takes courage to do that. Most of us would rather take the easy way out, which is pawn him off on somebody else if you can afford that, or let the state take care of him if you can't, because you have a life to live and a job to do, and things to do, money to spend, cars to buy, and it's interfering with my life. So we need to get them out of that. Well, that's kind of self-focused. And that was a hard choice to make, but it didn't stop his growth at all. He kept growing and becoming more. It's not like that stunted his becoming a more and more enlightened person. He continued to grow through that, probably because of it in many aspects. So for him, it was a big win, because we don't come here for fancy cars and nice houses. We come here in order to grow up, become love. And he was doing that in a very direct way. But it wasn't something that many people could have done. Most people couldn't have given themselves to that extent. So his life, I think, as a life of growth and evolving, was terrific. He was very, very successful as an engineer. All he did was take special projects that he could do from home, and in that way, he did excel, because he took some very special projects that other engineers couldn't figure out. So he was kind of the consultant that would get the hard jobs, and he could do those from home. So in a way, his career really did do pretty well, but he couldn't work a lot of hours, but he carried on his work from home.
Yeah, the end of life care is definitely something that is special in that, especially when it involves a parent and child, because when we come into this world, like, our parents shepherd us into this 3D realm, and then when they get ready to pass on, it's like it becomes the it can become the child's responsibility to kind of rebirth them into the place from which we came.
Right. Yeah, and it's a responsibility that often kind of gets walked away from, and it takes courage to embrace it, particularly when those parents were like his, and they were hard to deal with. They were demanding and negative, and they were not Alzheimer's gentle and peaceful. They were Alzheimer's kind of wild and crazy. But he dealt with it very, very well.
All right, that brings us to the capstone question, number 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
I already did that. It's exactly the same as to become a woman. It means, well, yeah, that's a little different question, isn't it? I'd say, what does it mean to become a man or a woman in today's world, if we can change that? It means that you have the opportunity to actualize your potential by letting go of your fear and doing what is right. I guess the example of Ted Vollers, that's the person I was talking about before. He, from his home, he ran my forum. He ran the MBT forum for me for years from his home. That was the person I was talking about that had the courage. It means you have the opportunity to actualize your potential by letting go of your fear and doing what is right, by becoming love, making low entropy choices. That's what life is about, whether you're male or female. Actually, that's what life's about, whether you're a dog or a cat. That's what life is about. If you're conscious, if you have consciousness, all consciousness is basically on that same path to try to evolve the quality of its conscious, of your consciousness. That's the point in life, becoming love. So that's what it means. Now, as far as the gender goes, what does it, mean to be male rather than female? Well, we come with instincts with that. The instincts for the man is to take care of. He takes care of his family, of his wife and his children. He provides and protects, and that's his kind of instinctive role. Now, today, our roles have smeared quite a bit between the genders, but we still come with instincts, and that's kind of the male instinct. And the female instinct is to have children and take care of them, to feed them up to where they can eat on their own, and then basically do the child care thing. So that's kind of where they are instinctually. Now, our culture isn't bound by those things socially anymore. They were, if you go back a millennia ago, that was what was necessary for people to live. You had to have some guy, taking care of and protecting, and you had to have some lady, basically having and taking care of the children. And not that the woman didn't do some of her own, provisioning, and not that the man didn't ever take care of the children. I don't mean to say that, but it just means that was their predominant roles in life, and we got that out of our necessity to survive. Survive and procreate. Those are the two constraints that we have in this particular virtual reality that we call the physical universe. And our instincts grow to meet those two needs. So males and females develop very differently because of the pressures and requirements that were on them. And Homo sapien succeeded as a species because we specialized. There were other species of hominids then, Neanderthal being one, but that was, as I understand it, there was 5 or 6 or 7 different species of hominids that we have fossil evidence of, but only Homo sapiens is left. Homo sapiens kind of won that, that competition. And we did that because we specialized. The females did what they did best, and it had to do with having babies because the females have the babies. So that's where their role came from. And the male had to protect them so that they survived, so that those children could have babies. They specialized in their roles. Some of the others, it seems, were more likely more egalitarian, where everybody does everything. Everybody, is part of a part of all the things that are necessary. So they didn't specialize as much as Homo sapien did. And because we specialized, we were more successful. And because we specialized, we were more prolific. We popped out more children that survived to go on and have more children better and more efficiently and effectively than any of the others. And eventually, we just subsumed them. We swallowed them up genetically because when we interbred with them and whatever, there was so many more of us than them that they just kind of, we absorbed them. And Homo sapiens went on. And that's why today everybody has, 1 or 2% of Neanderthal, in their genome. And those others probably didn't get as plentiful as Neanderthal, but some of their genes are in there too, no doubt. So it's not that we had great wars and we killed off all the other hominids. It wasn't like that so much as it was that our specialization allowed us to have more children and have more of them survive. And our instincts evolved just for that reason, for survival. And now males and females, survival isn't the problem anymore. There's 8 billion of us, right? Pretty much here on the planet, and survival of our species is not a big problem for us from day to day. So we have other things, and the world is not such a violent place as it was. So the idea of protection and provisioning now isn't exclusively a male role. It's spread out. So we're changing, but those instincts are still in there. And we have to have a positive attitude toward them. So if you get crosswise with your instincts, if your instincts are telling you to go right and you go left, that will hit you at a deep level as wrong and a problem. And if you continue being crosswise with your instincts, it makes you neurotic. It makes you feel like you're not doing it right. It makes you negative towards yourself. So it's not a good thing to get crosswise with your instincts. So males have their instincts that were born out of survival and procreation, and females have theirs. They're quite different instincts, what makes us so different. We have more, what do they call that? There's a word for that. It's the difference between male and female within a species. There's a name for that, but in any case, there's more of it in Homo sapiens than almost any other creature. If you look at dogs and cats, the males and females are different, yes, and they even have different attitudes, yes, but they're pretty similar. And pretty much everybody does everything. They all hunt, they all do everything. So that's more typical in the animal world. Humans are an animal, but we have more specific differences between male and female, and more different instincts between male and female than most all other species on the planet. And that is what made us so successful as a species.
And it just goes back to what you were talking about in the earlier question about actualizing our potential. We have these instincts, and then to act on that, and to do it in a way that's responsible and taking.
Right. Yeah, and just because you have instincts doesn't mean that you should always fulfill those instincts. You also have responsibility, and sometimes those instincts run counter to your responsibility. So you have to be responsible. You have to be able to say no to that instinct. I'm not saying that you always do whatever your instincts tell you to do. I'm saying that you have to be aware of them, have a positive attitude toward them, and learn how to live with them positively. Not just deny them. Oh, I don't have any instincts. I'm a human. We humans aren't animals, and we don't have instincts, and that sort of thing. We have to understand it. We have to accept it, and we have to live positively with it. So there are times you tell your instinct, no, it's inappropriate. And there's times that you tell your instinct, right on, go. I'm with you 100%. So we need to kind of evolve different instincts. Instincts aren't a fixed thing. It's not like you have these instincts that they can never change. They change over time, but they change slowly. They change very slowly. So we have to realize that we're still saddled with things that were generated 200,000 years ago, and we need to be positive about them and accept them and deal with them, not let them rule our life. Not let them, become irresponsible and inappropriate, but not deny them either, or just try to bury them. That just makes you crazy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maintaining the awareness of, instinct or anything is absolutely essential.
Yes.
To identify who we are. That we are. I am, right?
Yes.
Before we wrap up, did you want to let the listeners know where the best place to find you is on the web?
Yes, you can. There's several places on the web. I have a website that is www.monroelaboratories.com. my-big-toe.com. You have to have hyphens between them or you'll go someplace else. So it's My Big Toe with hyphens. If you get there, you'll be able to find a lot of other things, other places to go. They'll take you to a place called, if you look for what are the upcoming events, that'll take you to a website called MBT Events, which is the people that plan events and so on. It'll also take you to my YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/TWCJR44. Or you can just Google my name, Thomas Campbell, and I'll be on the first page. You can go to all those things from there. If you forget all the details, you can just do that and that'll work. Or if you Google My Big Toe, I'll be on the first page of that too. So you can get it from there. Now, in the YouTube channel, almost everything I do, every time I have a gathering or an event, almost every time, I try to video it, get audio and video, and then I put it out for free on YouTube. So I've done a lot of events in the last, 10 or 15 years. So I've got thousands of hours of video there, and it's very intimidating. Particularly, many of my videos are long because the events were long. They were all day events, or sometimes they were all week events. So some of my events will have, one of them has 18 different videos, in one event. But typically they have less than that. And sometimes each one of those videos might be, an hour or an hour and a half, or some of them are even 2 or 3 hours long. So it can be intimidating to get into my work. But now I have a very nifty search tool. You go to my site and look at videos, there'll be a thing that'll say search tool. You go to that search tool and it will search through all of those thousands of hours of video for the subject that you put into it. So you put in the subject you're interested in, and it'll return to you a bunch of links by order of importance, the most significant at the top and so on, and then the less significant as you go down. And you click on that link, it'll take you to that minute of that video on YouTube where that subject is discussed. So I had some volunteer techies who were very, very smart in this area. They put that whole thing together for me, and I had a bunch of volunteers timestamp every minute of all those videos by subject, and not only timestamp them, but to say where they occurred in what video, but also to judge the significance level of that thing. Like if you're talking about reincarnation, was I defining it, or did I just mention it, or was it a big discussion about it? So they had to judge how much it fit in that category, how important it was to that category. So for those of you that go to the YouTube and then turn away because it's just too much to deal with, you can go to that tool and find and kind of skip through things with your attention. Also, I have a playlist on YouTube where I have just put the things that have to do with science. If you're into science and, kind of the new physics that I'm talking about, a better physics that explains the paradoxes and so on in physics today, then you'll find a playlist of, I think the first one started was a trilogy, a science trilogy, but then I added things to it. So now it's a trilogy plus maybe 3 or 4 other things. And if you look there, you'll find a lot of the science talked about. So those of you who are science interested, those of you who are more into the intuitive side, that intuitive work is everywhere. If you want a basic tour over the whole thing, then probably go to the things I call workshops. Those were usually 2-day events where I discussed the theory in detail and then did some practice. Now, if you're interested in going out of body or doing paranormal things or speaking to others telepathically, healing, remote viewing, talking to dead people, whatever it is that interests you, if you're interested in any of that, of course, all has to go through the intuitive channel. The intellectual channel does not access any of that. It's the intuitive channel. And I've got three things actually, that I would suggest that you do then. One is that I have a course that's just an audio course. And you can find that. Again, you go to my site and you go to the MBT Events site, and you'll find there's an audio course that will explain to you what these paranormal things are, how they work, why they work that way, what you can do with them, what you can't, limitations and techniques and all of that, plus give you a binaural beat, plus give you time to go out and practice and then come back and ask questions. Well, what my friends Donna and Keith Warner did is they took all of these events I've done, which was many, and they distilled it down to the best questions, the best answers, to the best explanations that I gave, and they made a 5-day course out of it on audio. And of course, you can take it in a week or 2 weeks, or you can take it longer. If you do it in 5 days, it's probably most successful, because in these kinds of things, being intensive, it actually makes it easier. But anyway, so that's there. And it's not very expensive. It's like $80 for a 5-week training course with the binaural beats and so on included. So if you're interested in experiencing paranormal, that course would be a good thing. You'll understand you'll understand, how these things work. How does it work to heal people with your mind? What is remote viewing? What are the mechanics of it? Where does that information come from and why? So it goes into all of that. The other thing that is new that I put out, and you will be able to find it on the web, is called Tom's Park. And Tom's Park was a product that I made. It's a book, a very short book, not like the huge books that I did before. This is just a little book. It's only 60 pages. And it's not so much you get it because you want to read the book, but the book explains a process, a technique, and a way of developing your intuitive side. And if you wish to experience the paranormal, you'll need to develop your intuitive side. And in my courses, I found there was a bunch of people who tried and tried and tried, but just couldn't do it. The out-of-body would maybe be occasionally spontaneous, would happen, but mostly it didn't happen, and they couldn't do it when they wanted to, and most couldn't do it at all. They tried and just failed. They came to my training courses 3 or 4 times, walked away with no out-of-body experiences. So I came up with a way that they could be successful. The problem they had is that their intellect would always get in the way. This is an intuitive thing. And their intellect would sit there and just get in the way. As soon as the intellect takes charge, then you lose the intuitive thing. And when you lose that, you're done. It doesn't work. So I came up with a process that is basically made in this Tom's Park, where that transition between here and there isn't a 1 or a 0. It's not like, okay, I'm in this reality. Oh, now I'm out of body. I'm not in this reality. I'm another reality. That's like a hard transition. It just happens in an instant. Well, that's the barrier that they couldn't get their intellect past. They couldn't make that transition. So I created this Tom's Park such that the transition was invisible. It didn't happen at one time. You can be partly here and partly there. And you don't have any prerequisites for this. You don't have to learn how to meditate. You don't need binaural beats. You don't need any aids at all. You start with your imagination. And you go to Tom's Park, and there's all kinds of interesting and fun things to do there. I mean, just lots and lots of things to do. And you get involved in those things with your imagination to the point that the story begins to take a life of its own. In other words, instead of you playing all the parts, let's say you're having a conversation and you're saying what you say, but you're also saying what the other person says, because this is in your imagination, your daydream. Eventually, the other person just says things without you really putting those words there. But you lose it every so gradually. It starts out 100% you, your daydream, you're playing all the parts, you're making everything up. Then eventually it's 90% you and 10% things are just happening that you're not really in charge of. They just happen. And then it's 50% you and 50%. So it's this gradation in this daydream of you being in charge or you just letting the daydream kind of unravel as it does. And you get to that just through practice. So you iteratively go through this until you do that. And then the park has all sorts of ways that connect you to the paranormal once you're in there, that enable you to do whatever it is you want to do. Or if all you want to do is grow yourself, or if all you want to do is be more creative, be more empathetic, connect more with people at an intuitive level, well, it'll help you do all of that too. Or if you're just working on your own development, well, you can do that. There's a fear clinic in there. There's a health clinic in there. There's a hot springs that has health benefits. There's all sorts of things that you have. So it's just Tom's Park, and there's lots of people in there too. There's staff, a lot of staff in the park, and there's restaurants. There's a lodge. You can, if you want to go there and get something to eat, they serve really good meals. If you want somebody to eat with, those staff will come sit down and have dinner with you and talk to you. So it's an interesting place. It's a safe place. There's nothing can hurt you there. And I make it very clear that if you find anything negative there, it's because you bring it there. It comes in with you. So it's just interesting. It's kind of new. It's expensive for a book. It's $80 for a 60-page book, and that seems ridiculous. But $80 for a training course that will last, for years and years and years, and you never outgrow this. If you're a beginner and know nothing, it's perfect for you. But if you're advanced and know a lot, it's still good for you. It works. It's got a lot of different levels in it, so it works for everybody. So for a training course that will last for maybe hundreds and hundreds of uses, $80 is really, really inexpensive. Most training courses are like $1,000 to $3,000 for a week in a training course, and then it's over. This one's never over, but it requires you to create the story. And what happens is the larger consciousness system is kind of a partner with me in this, and that you start with your imagination, and it starts to feed you data stream to match what you're doing in your imagination. It starts playing the other parts in that imagination. And then eventually you learn to just let that go to where all of what's going on in your mind is the data stream you're getting from the larger consciousness system. And then you're out of body. You're no longer here. You're no longer getting information through your senses. You're getting a data stream that is outside of this virtual reality we call the physical universe. So it's a real easy way to get out of body whenever you want to make it something of your will rather than just whenever it happens. So those are some interesting things some of your readers might want to take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds amazing. I know I will definitely be checking those out myself. The links for all that will be in the show notes for the listener. Yet stuff like this just really, really turns me on because it's all practical pearls of wisdom. When I was a listener to a podcast before I started getting involved, like these are the things I loved to take away. So I will definitely be checking that out. And,
also Tom,
in I guess in the spirit of asking weird questions or honest questions, Adam, my co-host, has a separate podcast all about remote viewing. So I was just going to see if Adam had any last minute thoughts.
No, on that, I just want to thank you for the binaural beats, because I've been looking for a long time for good binaural beats, and I appreciate the fact that you've got them both in MP3 and FLAC format. So when we get off here, I'm definitely going to be going and acquiring those. So absolutely. Thank you so much.
Guys, just because time's up, we don't have to quit if you don't want to. I don't have anything back to back with this. If you wanted to do more questions or turn this into a 2-part or whatever, I'm welcome to stay here until you finish all your questions if you want.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got a few bonus questions here we can go through, Bill, if you want.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through them now. Here's a good one. What institution of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
Education, I'd say that would be the one that I would change. The education system we have now is just not very effective, and it's not very, I was going to say not very useful. It's as much counterproductive as it is productive for us. I think we need to change it dramatically. And that is, we need to teach children how to think. We need to teach them how to, what's it called, critical thinking. We need to teach them some of life skills. What is life all about? Well, maybe that would come when they're 20-some in philosophy, but we can do that even in kindergarten, life skills, the way to approach things. Just some of the things we've talked about right here could be done at a very elementary level. It's not so much important what happens as it is how you deal with it. These are concepts that you could talk to young people. Most of the things we've said here are things that you could introduce to very young people. But those kinds of things would help children see bigger pictures, help see themselves and define themselves as who they are. And that kind of education, we don't do anything with at all. We let that fall on the floor. And our people grow up to be insecure. They grow up to be neurotic. They grow up to be, full of ego, pretty much because they don't really have an idea what's important and what's not. We don't help them come to those conclusions. Now, I am not in favor of brainwashing in the sense that children, here's what you believe. That's not it at all. You have to help them become, what they want. In other words, you're the catalyst to help them do the learning and come to their own conclusions. You just help them start thinking about things and wondering about things and let them come to their conclusions, even if it is a 6-year-old's conclusion. That's fine. But you've helped them come to it, even if it's wrong, from a scientific point or something, it may be wrong, but that doesn't matter. That's not so important. They can fix that later. It's not getting them to memorize facts and get the right answers. That's the wrong way to approach education. It's not about right answers. It's about the ability to think and understand. And if you can help them think and understand and build in a curiosity that when they find new things, that's wonderment. That's good. Not like, new things go away. Diversity. Not that you preach about diversity, but you give them diversity. You talk about lots of different kinds of things. You introduce them to ideas and let them have their own sense of it. No, an 8-year-old is not going to have the right answers because they're 8 years old. But if it's their answer, that's what's important. They need to come to their own answer. And then when they're 9 years old, they'll come to a different answer. It'll keep changing as they grow up and get more perspective on life and understand things. But they will have the ability to think, to change, to grow. And we don't encourage that. What we encourage is, remember what I teach you. I'm telling you the facts. You memorize and regurgitate those facts to me. Well, shoot, that's the way you make a computer, not the way you make a human. A computer, you fill it full of lines of code. Those are the facts that it follows. But these are human beings. We don't want to try to lecture to them and tell them right answers. You go into life, here's all the right answers. And here's, it's just not the right way. Lecturing is not how to teach children. Lecturing is not even how to teach adults. Lecturing is probably the worst way to teach anybody anything, is to sit down and lecture them. You teach, people should learn through living, through caring, through connection, through relationship. And all of that is important. There was a book that came out, 10 or 20 years ago called Everything I Know That's Important I Learned in Kindergarten, some sort of book like that. Well, that's the point. Yes, you learn socialization, you learn interaction, you learn those things. And after that, They just feed you facts, and those facts aren't important. You can learn those facts whenever you need to have them. So those are the sort of things that I think that I would change if I wanted to change an institution. It would be the way we approach education. I would want every kid to wake up in the morning and be anxious to go to school, not feel like school is like prison. I have to go to school. I get marched to school. Then they march me in lines to the cafeteria, tell me what to do, when to do it, stuff facts in my head that I'm supposed to remember and send me home. It's boring, it's tedious, and it basically ruins children's ability to be authentic. It ruins their ability. They're taught in school, this is how you're supposed to be. You're supposed to sit down. You're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to remember these things. And they learn that how they present themselves is much more important than how they actually are. How they actually are needs to be suppressed. And they have to, instead of being who they are, they have to be who the teacher wants them to be, expects them to be. So right away in school, we learn not to be authentic. We learn that our image, what we present, that's our image. So what we present is very important, that what we are isn't. We learn that truth is not important. Image is everything. If you've got the right image, you'll be the winner, you will succeed, and it doesn't matter what you've got underneath the hood. That's not important. So these are not good things to teach children, that truth is not important and image is everything. But that's basically what they learn in school. And to a child, going to school is a chance for them to interact with their peers, and that's it. The sitting in class and learning, that's just what they have to endure in order to hang out with their peers. And for children to be hanging out with a whole bunch of kids their age is not particularly good socialization. It's too unstructured, too wild, too crazy, too immature. It just reinforces the immaturity that's naturally there. It's not helpful for their growing up. So I would like to change that. Now, as far as other things, say, well, I'd like to change the industry, so that the people that run companies don't just lie, cheat, and steal to try to get other people's money. And I'd like to change politicians so politicians would tell the truth and be honest. But those are just symptoms. You see, we're talking about adults now, and those are just symptoms. The politicians that don't tell the truth and the corporations that are just trying to grab money, they're not the problem. They're the symptom of the problem. And just like in medicine, if all you do is go after the symptoms, you don't really fix anything and you don't really change anything. And we've been struggling with these symptoms for centuries, and they're all still here. That's not how you fix it. You can fix that bad politician, replace him, get somebody in there better, but that's not going to change much, because eventually it'll go back to just the way it was. It won't. That's not how you fix things. The only way to fix what's wrong here is by changing us. Those nasty politicians and executives that control things, they just represent the quality of humanity. They represent us. You can't really fundamentally change anybody but yourself. So the only way to fix those politicians and those executives is by changing us. And as we grow up and evolve the quality of our consciousness, those things will just change by themselves. You don't have to go change them. If you try to change them now, they'll just revert back. Get rid of that dictator, and eventually there'll be another dictator that replaces him. You have to change the people. And when you change the people, the dictators will just disappear, because the people won't live that way. They just won't accept it. Yes, the power is with the people, not with the leader. The power is with the people. And if the people say that's just won't work, then it won't work. but we have to grow up, and you can't change anybody else but yourself. So the most valuable gift that you can give the world is to grow up, get rid of your fear, get rid of your ego, get rid of your beliefs. That is the most that you can do for the world. And after you have got some success at that, you can help other people do the same. That's my idea about changing things. Changing the symptoms is not important, and it's civilizing. Yeah, you get rid of a bad dictator and it's nice now. It's better to live there. So it is civilizing, but it doesn't help anybody grow up. That has to happen one person at a time.
Yeah.
So
the education system has a huge part to play in that too, like growing up. And
yes, it does. Yeah, if you teach people that image is everything and truth is nothing, well, how do you expect them to grow up? That's, that being authentic just gets you in trouble. Because when you're 6 or 7 years old and you're told to sit in a seat for an hour, and instead you kind of squirm and are anxious to go outside, well, that's authentic, but that'll get you in trouble. And if you give the teacher an answer that may be right, but it's not the answer the teacher wants you to memorize, so it's wrong anyway, well, that teaches you things that are dysfunctional. And that's the way our schools are. It's a very dysfunctional way to raise children.
Yeah, it's been a popular answer to this question of past guests is the education system in general.
Yeah.
I'm looking back at the last time that we asked this was to a guest by the name of Ed Lattimore, who's a heavyweight boxing champ, and he said that school is not meant to prepare you for the world. It's there to make you dependent on it.
Yes, absolutely. Make good little cogs for the machine. Yeah.
We're in an all-encompassing reflective thing. It reminds me of what you were saying before, that it's consuming. You're not creating in this realm. You're being told that you need to be fed these things, and therefore you're never going out and experiencing things that will give you knowledge in life. If you teach a man to fish, then he's going to have to learn not how to fish, to make the lures, the strategies, and that just leads to so many other things aside from just grab food in mouth, wait.
Right, exactly. Yes, it's some of the life skills we can teach at every grade, even kindergarten. There are life skills. Matter of fact, they do a better job at teaching life skills in kindergarten than they do, in the higher. The more you go up in grade level, the less life skills they teach, and the more they teach be a good little cog in the machine. And that's really not helpful to growing up. And if it's hard for people to change when they have an attitude that doing things different than what you're told is the problem. Doing things different than you're told is the solution of growing, changing, So, yeah.
Be creative.
So what other questions do we have still hanging out?
We've got this one. I think is a good one to end on, just because of the topic. But if you could give one sentence of advice to future generations, what would it be?
Oh, advice to future generations. You had a question here that had something like advice that you'd give to a teenager.
Yes.
Is that the same thing?
Yeah, should be. Yeah, it's just the teenager question was to yourself specifically, but if you wanted to change it to a teenager, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think what I would tell young people, is kind of the same thing I would tell, what would you tell, people in general? Young people, you just talk to them because they're more malleable. They still can think. By the time people get older, they get so set in their beliefs and their ego that it's harder for them to come up with an original idea or to understand. Whereas young people are still malleable enough to think about what you're saying if they choose to do so. The things that I would, the things that I would want to leave people to think about would be, one, to consider that maturity is measured in terms of self-centeredness. If you want to know what is maturity and are you mature, basically the question that is the same is, how self-centered are you? Children are naturally self-centered because it's all about them. They're babies, they're self-centered. It's all about their needs. They have a need, they cry, they fuss because they just depend on other people to meet their needs. So as you get older, maturity occurs as you begin to consider other people. And it's not just about you and your needs. You're not just the center of the universe anymore. So that's how you mature. You care more and more about others, cooperation, caring. See, these are the growing things. That is a measure of maturity. So think about that in terms of, we know people who are old. We may call them mature chronologically. Maybe they're 50 or 60 years old, but they're not necessarily mature if they're self-centered. They're still acting like 6-year-olds or 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds. That eventual growth of becoming an adult and being mature is really about letting go of self-centeredness. That's the key thing. Another thing I would say, it's just a point to think about. If I was telling people, things to think about, another thing to think about is that success is measured in terms of self-satisfaction, not in how big your bank account is. Another thing would be something we've already talked about: be skeptical of everything while also being open-minded at the same time. Have no beliefs. And I would add to that, the one person you should be most skeptical of is yourself, because we tend to tell ourselves the things that go along with our beliefs. We tend to tell ourselves the things that make us look good and look like we're doing the right thing. That's what our ego does. So be skeptical of everything, particularly of yourself. The other thing is that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. If it's not your personal experience, then you can read about it and you can choose to believe it or not believe it, or to accept it or not accept it, but that's a belief, and that's not really all that useful. So if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. So what do we do with things? We tend to put everything into that, I believe it or I don't believe it. Everything's a 1 or a 0 for us. That's because that's what our education system tells us. It's either right or wrong. Everything's right or wrong. And so if somebody tells you something and you think about it, you'll feel the compulsion to either believe it or disbelieve it, accept it or reject it. And that compulsion is a problem. What you need to do is say, well, maybe. I don't have enough information yet to tell whether that's true or not. So I'll just keep that over here on the side as a possibility. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. And my life will give me experiences that will help me judge whether that probability is a 90 or a 10 or anything in between. So as I learn, and if I'm particularly interested in that, then I'll start doing research to come up with those experiences or that information that I need to do that. So you should go through life with the idea that your own experience should define your own truth. That doesn't mean that if you haven't experienced it, it isn't true. It just means that that's the part of being open-minded. You let everything almost be possible. Very few things should you say flatly, that's a 0. That probability is 0. That should be a very, very few things. And they should be very big, fundamental things, if anything at all. You should very seldom have a 1. That is absolutely true and always will be true and always is. There's very, very few of those 1s either in life. Most of life should be somewhere in between those, and that must be a variable, something that can change. Well, I don't think that's true, but we'll see what my experience will say about that. So then you try to have the experiences that'll tell you about that so that you can change it. Or if you don't care about it, then just let it sit there. So everything in your life, rather than having the compulsion to believe it or disbelieve it, take it in as a possibility and assign it a probability and let that probability go up or down as your experience base grows. And that's I think, is an important way. And the other thing that we already talked about is it doesn't really matter what happens. It matters how you deal with what happens. And another way of saying that same thing is it isn't the destination, it's the journey. Where you end up in the destination isn't really all that important, whether you end up rich or poor or, up or down or whatever. That's not so important. What's important is how you made that journey, the quality with which, the positiveness with which you made that journey. That's what's important. Just like my friend who stayed with, spent 20 years of his prime of his life in his career taking care of parents. But what he learned was immense. He grew a great deal in doing that. So that was very successful, even though most people would look at him and say, oh man, he never amounted to much, just stayed home, took care of some old people who were mentally deficient and wasted his life. No, he didn't do that. He grew immensely, learning to grow up, become mature by being about others. It's a very growing experience for him. But now, if somebody took that on and say, okay, well, I'll take that experience, I'll take care of my old folks, but they really don't do it from the heart. They do it because they think they should. Now they're resentful. All right, they do it. They'll take care of them all right, but they resent it and they get bitter over it. And when it's all over, they feel like they were cheated. Well, see, that's not helpful. Now you're not doing it. You went through the motions. You acted the part of giving. And sure, you did all those things. You helped them get up. You helped them go to the bathroom. You talked to them. You did all the stuff, but you didn't do it from the heart. You did it from the intellect, and you were just acting the part. That doesn't help you grow up at all. Matter of fact, that's de-evolving, because the resentment causes you to get more fear and to grow, to de-evolve rather than evolve. So it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. That's important. So morality and ethics in life is not so much about what you do as it is about why you do it.
Yeah, there's a phrase that came to my mind that resent is just a mild form of hate.
Yeah. And you end up hating both them and yourself is the problem. If you dislike yourself, that's a problem. That's a very big problem. And our society is full of people who have the fear of being inadequate, that they're not good enough, that they're not what they should be. And that because they understand that that's a fact, they should be better. And something just in their consciousness, right? And just in being human tells them they're not all that they could be, but they don't know what to do about it or how to whatever. So they feel insecure, and that's a fear. And now they start making their choices out of that fear. They choose to do this or not do that based on that fear. And then that fear grows, and that's kind of endemic in our culture, that people are insecure. Well, it's all part of the same thing. You learn that in school. You learn that your image is what's important. Well, in that case, it's really hard to get out of that box. So yeah, it all ties up together. So those are just some statements, some short statements that I would say that if I had a teenager, I would express those things, not because I expected them to give me any answers or to, even have a strong opinion, but just things to think about and to consider. And, might they be of value to help people make the choices that they have to make.
Absolutely. These are all sage pieces of advice. I really like the maturity is measured in terms of self-centeredness. I feel like we could put that on a t-shirt or something.
Yeah. Yeah, because you talk about maturity, and we think of it in terms of chronological. Oh, okay, you're 35 years old, you're 40 years old, you're mature. But that's not the case. There's all kinds of 35, 40-year-olds that aren't mature at all. They're arrogant, they're self-centered, they're bossy, and that's not maturity, because your 3-year-old is arrogant and bossy, and you expect that because they're 3 years old. But Mom, I want that, and getting that is their whole life is just about getting that they want. And they're very self-centered. They don't really care that that's a lot of extra trouble for Mom or, anything else, how much it costs. None of that's relevant to them. They just want it. And that's natural. And we allow children to be that way. We work with them. We explain things to them. We do that. But then once you become an adult, well, now you can't explain anything to anybody because they're adult. They already know everything. If you try to explain it to them, then you're just going to start a fight. So the ability to teach through explanation disappears pretty much as people become adults. They have to get it on their own, or they can't get it. They don't get it at all. And if you don't learn to care about other people before you're 18 or 20, it's not likely you're going to pick up that as much as you should. It's going to be much harder as an adult. And you'll carry that immaturity with you all the way to your grave. You'd be, 80 years old and still immature.
That's interesting to think about what the future generations are going to look like compared to what's going on now. But hopefully we can work out things for the better, right?
Oh yeah, I'm very positive about, we now have finally come, humanity, has come to the point that all the pieces that are necessary for a big leap forward in our quality of consciousness are all in place. We've got them now. It's just what we do with it. Up until now, we didn't have them. It was impossible for humanity as a whole to take like a great leap forward. It wouldn't happen. We had little bubbles of enlightenment, like 2,500 years ago, you have a Buddha. And the Buddha says, this reality is Maya. It's illusion. Well, I say it's a virtual reality. It's all the same. It's all the same. It's an illusion. So people have understood the nature of reality for thousands of years, but it's always been in the margins. It's never been able to get out of the margins. The mainstream rejects all of that. The mainstream, if it doesn't outright reject it, it rejects it inside. They may give lip service to it, but it's not something that they really have at a deep level. So that's it's always been that way. But now, because we finally got to the information age with an internet, we have the possibility of going from a widespread bunch of people who don't really give a damn about each other back to a tribe where everybody cares about each other. It used to be, 50 years ago, so-and-so had a tidal wave or an earthquake and 100,000 people die, and the rest of the world says, oh, I never heard of that place. Where's that? Is that in Asia? Or is that in Africa? Oh, well. And you just forget about it because out of sight, out of mind, you don't know them. It's just somebody else's problem and not yours. So there's no empathy there, but that's not true anymore. Now we see those people. We see the dead bodies washing up on shore. We see the children crying, and we connect. We have empathy. Our heart goes out. We send them money. We feel bad for them. Well, that's good. That's starting to bring out our humanity better. So yeah, the internet can also be an evil thing too. It's good and evil both. But so that's the nature of things. We have to make the correct choices to make it a good thing. But at least now, these ideas can go mainstream, whereas before, they really couldn't go mainstream. Because the thing is, if somebody gets, like the Buddha comes up and he gets enlightened and he tells people about it, well, and then he's got a little enlightened group around him and so on. But as it spreads, the more it spreads, the more dilute it becomes. The more other people add things to it that suit them. It becomes a more dilute product. And then people start taking advantage of it. And then you have people who are faking it, as priests or whatever, because there's power in it. And that's what happens when it spreads. So it's only effective in a bubble. As the bubble grows, it loses its potency. So that's the problem. Never goes mainstream. But now it could go mainstream. Now, will it or not is a different question. We have to grow up. But the possibility of it going mainstream is now here. So it's never been here before. 50, 60 years ago, it couldn't happen. Humanity was not going to take a big step forward. But now we might. We could. It's possible. And with scientists now claiming that reality is information-based, then we're starting to get on the right track. Because as soon as those scientists say, our reality is a virtual reality, which is just another way of saying information-based, then a lot of people are going to start asking philosophical questions like, where's the computer? Who's the programmer? And that's going to start conversation going. And hopefully that could turn very positive, turn into an understanding, because it's just a logical consequence of that this is a virtual reality, that love is the answer. You can go straight from this is a virtual reality to love is the answer with solid logic. And usually logic rises to the top eventually, even if it takes a long time. So I think it will get there. I'm sure we'll get there because that's what we're evolving to. And evolution is relentless. Evolution is slow, really, really slow, but it's relentless. It just keeps chugging on to whatever it is it's pushing it. Just like in our physical, what we call the physical world, it's the procreation and survival. And it just keeps pushing. And it just keeps we just keep evolving and changing to better meet that criteria. But in consciousness, it's lowering entropy. That's how consciousness evolves, by creating more information, more valuable information. And that ending is love. Love is the answer, because you take a social system, which is what humanity is, and you try to lower entropy within that system. The only way to do that is cooperation and caring. That's how you lower entropy. And our consciousness system is a system evolving toward lower entropy. So we will get there. But it'd be nice if we got there sooner instead of later. That would be nice. But now we have the possibility that those ideas could go mainstream. And it's logical. The logic is laid out now to get from A to B. So I'm hopeful that we will, and maybe even in this century, take a kind of a big step. One of the neat ideas is that I have to show you, I have to get my picture here where I can see it so you can see this arm. The way evolution is really slow, grows and grows and grows, and then goes fast. It's one of those functions. It's an acceleration function, because every time you evolve, it's easier to evolve further. It's like education. The more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. So our evolution has been very, very slow. Homo sapiens have been walking around for like 200,000 years. And most of that time, we've organized ourselves in terms of warlord. That's been our social arrangements have been warlord. In other words, control, power, force has been the coin of the realm. That's what matters. Control, power, and force changes things. Everything else gets run over and ground up. Well, that's the way it's been in this long climb. But now, in the last 200 years, we've made a lot of strides. Things are different now. And they continue to get better. And we're on the knee of that curve where it's starting to change more quickly. We've grown up more in the last 500 years than we did for all the years up to that point, as far as changing. So we're in the knee of the curve, which means it's going to change more quickly. And it can only do that by going mainstream. And I think that's what's in the near future, maybe a decade, 2 decades away. I think we'll begin to see the initial, uptick there that will start us with this bigger step in our evolution instead of these tiny, tiny increments that we've been doing. We're going to take some bigger steps. And once we take a big step, then it'll be easier to take an even a bigger step next. And we may do the wrong thing and fall backwards a step, but that's all right. We'll pick back up and start chugging again, because that's the way evolution works. So that's it, guys. I guess that's a happy ending. Is we are going to succeed, and life will get better, and this will become a gentler, kinder, more supportive world to live in. That's inevitable. The big question is how long? How much longer will it take? It depends on us.
Yeah.
One person at a time is how it has to change.
Are we looking at lifetimes or geologic ages?
I'm thinking that we'll be able to make significant better steps within a couple of decades. And that we can maybe take a kind of collectively a bigger step within this century, maybe just 3 or 4 decades. I think we're on the cusp of that. We're at the knee of that curve where the changes are getting faster and faster. You know the old saying about you're on internet time now? You're not on old time. You're on internet time. Everything happens faster now. Well, it does. Everything happens faster because happening means communication. We talk to each other. We learn from each other. We grow. That communication now is much quicker than it was. The learning curve is going faster. We're going up it faster and faster, and we can go negatively. But yeah, I think in your lifetime, you guys are both young. You ought to be able to live to see these ideas at least starting to go mainstream. It won't really blossom in a big way until you get maybe 10, 20% kind of feel this way out of those 18 billion. If you get 10 or 20%, that'll be all it'll take to bring all the rest of them along. Because the average person out there, if you ask the average person, hey, how do you think we're doing? How are we doing here at Homo sapiens? Most everybody would say, not so good. This world has a lot of problems. There's a lot of things that are suboptimal that just need to change. There's greed, there's manipulation, there's all kinds of dysfunctional things going on here. We're not doing that well. We need to change. But if you ask them, well, what should we do and how should we change and how could we affect that? Well, nobody really knows, because they think that there's something outside of them needs to change. But what needs to change is something inside of them. And they don't get that. They don't understand that. As we change, that'll change. But if you have a whole bunch of people, if you have most of those 18 billion people thinking, we need to change, we need to find better ways, what we're doing isn't working very well. And if then a 10% comes along that actually shows how that change works, well, people will jump on that bandwagon in a really big hurry. And suddenly being kind rather than acting kind will become something to be, a goal for growing up. They'll understand maturity is about not being self-centered, and all these ideas come, people will start growing up faster. And instead of taking tiny little steps, they'll take bigger steps, and then the next step will be bigger yet. So I see that that's coming, and I think the physicists will probably kick it off without any idea of what they're kicking off. They just by making the statement that this is a virtual reality, because that then will start everybody else thinking. Physicists won't think about those other things. They're going to say, hey, wait a minute, we didn't mean to go there, but I think it'll be too late to put those horses back in the barn. They'll be out. If that's a fact, I call the scientists the high priests of Western culture, because the role of the high priest is to tell everybody else what to believe. And, century ago, not a century, but a millennia ago, those high priests were all religious, and they told the people what to believe. But now the high priests are the scientists, the physicists. If the physicists say this is the way the world is, most people will say, well, that's the way the world is. Those physicists, that's what they do. They find the facts, and they test those facts. And if they say that's a fact, then that's the way the world is, and you're mainstream. So once the high priests kind of nod in that direction, I believe it'll start to catch on in the mainstream. More and more people will get it. So we're close, guys. I don't think we're that far away. We've got the tools now. Things can spread. We're not stuck in a bubble anymore.
Well, it's probably more of a, you can't see the forest through the trees, but, somebody's already started the fire, and all it takes is the wind blowing in one direction long enough, and eventually, once it catches, then, everything is set for success. So, I see it. You can't see it until it happens.
Yeah, exactly. So, I stay very, very positive, very, very much an optimist. And, people who look at the world and they say, gee, this world sucks. Look at all the violence, look at all the nastiness, the greed, and everybody's gimme, gimme, gimme. It's a very self-centered place out there. People are full of fear, full of ego, full of beliefs, and they're upset by that. But instead of being upset and angered by that, you need to just say, well, that's the way it is. Everybody is on a path to evolve their consciousness. They're doing the best they can with what they've got. What they've got is how much they've lowered entropy up to this point. And they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And when this life is over, they'll start again and another. And they'll grow maybe a little bit. Maybe they'll go backwards a little bit. But it is what it is. And if you meet that with anger and upset and annoyance, you become part of the problem. Because that negativity is the problem. Whereas if you just accept it and say, well, okay, I have compassion for those people. All those angry people, they're not happy people. They're miserable people. And, I think, well, how can I help? And then you do things that you think are part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So anybody that looks and says, oh, those stupid people, how could they do that? How could they vote that way? How could they do these things? And the people on the other side are saying the same thing about you. And all of that anger is just part of the problem. Doesn't solve anything. We're fighting over symptoms. Nobody's looking at the problem. But eventually I think they will. If they understand they're in a virtual reality and that the point of it is to grow up and become love, then suddenly you've got a fundamental focus on life. So that's what I would say to all those angry people out there who are just fed up with how rotten this world is that if that angers you and upsets you, you've become part of the problem. You're letting it drag you down. You need to find joy and peace and satisfaction anyway, even in a world that's full of nastiness. There's a lot of good people in this world, a lot of positive people. You just need to seek them out and spend time with them and let go of those people that are constantly dragging you into anger and upset and stress and all the rest of it. So it's a choice. Everything's about your choice. We evolve according to the choices we make.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm probably running you guys over, and you're probably, will this guy ever be quiet and let us end this thing? But
no, not at all.
But yeah, Adam, any last minute thoughts before we wrap up?
No, none that I can think of. It's my mind is still churning through all of it, so no. I guess I have more questions than I have questions.
Well, it takes a while to create a good question. And every time I answer a question, I create at least 3 or 4 more. That's just the nature of learning. Every time you learn something new, now opens up another whole set of things that you can learn that you couldn't have learned before because you didn't have, the first step of it. So it's just like that. So you get a question answered, and that'll open up at least another 3 or 4 or 5 questions. And then when they answer each one of those, as you understand them, will open up another 4 or 5, and it just keeps growing and accelerating. So it's the more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. And that's just the nature of learning. So it's good. And you have bunches of questions, you think about them. Some of them you'll resolve on your own, and some of them won't. And then you'll go search, you'll pull up a website, or you'll read a book, or you do something, and then you'll learn a little more, and then your questions will be different now. And every time you get your questions answered, another set at a little higher level of understanding pop up. That's good. That shouldn't be frustrating. That should be fun.
It should be fun and exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. That's what life is about: growing and taking care, doing it with care. From the heart.
Right. That's it. It's simple, isn't it?
Simple is not easy, though.
No, simple is not always easy because you have to change who you are to grow up. You have to become somebody else. You can't act it and grow up. You have to really become something else. And that is slow, hard work. But the key element to it, the key thing that makes it work is you have to really want to. You have to really want to at the basic being level, at the heart level. You have to want to grow up. You want to change, want to become more. And if you really put effort into that happening, it'll happen. All the right things that you need in your environment to make that succeed will be there. Yeah, you just need to want to. Most people really don't care that much. They're just too busy getting by to care much about the nature of reality or growing up or maturity or anything else. But once you get on the path, then mostly you stay on it and you keep learning. But just wanting to, sincerely, not intellectually wanting to, but wanting to at a deeper level. That's what makes it work. That's what changes you. Intellect doesn't have a whole lot of power. The intuitive side is much more powerful.
Yeah, intuition, using your heart, using these other senses other than our brains to operate and to feel with, right?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, guys. Well, it's been fun.
Yeah, same. And thank you so much for giving us your time. It's the most valuable thing, so it's not lost.
Great. Well, share it. Share it with as many people as you can. Knowledge and understanding is wonderful, but shared knowledge and shared understanding is much, much better. So,
couldn't say it better. And yes, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for spending time with us this Saturday.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming and doing what you do and spreading the word and helping other people. I can be just a voice yammering in the forest, right? And it's people like you that take it and move it out to where it does good. Yeah, I try to do that too, but I can't. Doing it myself is not the thing. The thing is to share it with as many people who share it with as many people, and that's how word gets out there. For me, all of this is a like you say, it's a labor of love. It's what I do. It's what is important to me, and it's what gives me energy.
Absolutely. Same here. I mean, collaboration, cooperation, it's the way the future is going to be built. And by having conversations and sharing them like this, it's right, we're building.
That's the foundation. That's where it starts.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't wanna why? I don't wanna why? you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo, what? How you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo, what? How you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo,
why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
how you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo, why? How you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo, what? How you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo, what? How you wonder who when they? How you wonder who when they? Yo, what?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.